Excellent. All right. Are you guys ready to go? Have some fun today?
Of course.
All
We're
right.
ready.
Well, welcome to our new edition of this episode. And I am thrilled. Theresa Caragol, founder and CEO of AchieveUnite. And we have an amazing lineup today to talk about the future of the partner ecosystem leader and what's changing. So we have six generations entering the workforce right now. According to the research, finally, Craig Millard, 70% of the C suite believe that partnering is a critical go to market and it's becoming more and more important. Thank God, hope, not less, because Hope and I've been doing this a long time. And so we want to talk about with all of you today what is the future of this role? So I'm just going to open it up. What are you guys seeing changing in the market, and what do you think is essential for these go to market leaders? And Joe, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. I think, a lot of things that's the same that it used to be. I mean, a lot of things that are common 10 years were common 10 years ago are common today. I think partners our leaders in partner roles need to have a purview across the whole sales landscape. A lot of CROs and CEOs or founders or companies will tend to try to divide these organizations up and see them as operating in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a channel leader has to come in and help leaders of companies that might have that mindset to think differently and to think about channels more holistically as a go-to-market motion versus an independent organization. At least that's what I see. And I think companies that have been very successful in the past have figured out how to do that. And a lot of companies still struggle with that mentality, not having that growth mindset.
And you have quite a history of partner leadership and now Xtreme, leading global partner ecosystems at Xtreme. I should have done your intro.
That's okay. That's
You're
fine. Yeah.
killing it. All
I,
right.
I, I have
Awesome.
been fortunate. I spent a lot of time at Cisco, as you know, and
Yeah.
most people know. But since then, I've worked for companies that didn't, move a box. I worked for a SaaS-based company and then worked for a CSP at AWS. And I got this. Fortunate for me, I got to see the approach to channels from a different lens versus, moving hardware. And and it's really helped me in my career because it helped me see things from different perspectives. Yes.
Awesome. And he has promised to be funny today. So we got that going for us, don't we, Hope?
I'll do my best. I don't know.
So,
We'll see.
Hope, you are leading what used to be Pure Storage, Everpure, and have I hear doing a phenomenal job. So tell us what you're seeing out there in just a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm actually leading the Americas for Everpure. Excited to be here. Today happens to be my 1 year anniversary, so very excited. It's been a great year so far. I think most everybody on the call knows Everpure is 100% channel focused, which means that's all we do is channel all the time. And our new CRO who just came in, Pat Finn, he talks about customer force, and it's very similar to what Joe talked about. Like everybody's in the channel business, whether you are a seller who has a direct
Mhm.
accounts that you're assigned to, if you have channel partners, if you're in marketing, if you're in finance, like we're all a customer force working together. And it's really all about driving that message. And I think to Joe's point, what we're seeing more and more is when you see new CROs coming in, and I'm sure Craig can talk about this and others, into that C-suite, they have some channel background now. They've either worked in the channel, around the channel, but seen partners break away, manufacturers break away because of the channel. And it's really kind of become like the golden age of the channel, right? I feel really bullish about what companies are doing, not just Everpure, but all companies around the power of the channel and really the force multiplier that it brings.
Thank you. I agree. There has been such an evolution in the last few years, especially for those of us that have been doing this a little while, Craig Millard.
Yeah.
What are you seeing have you placed both of these friends here? Have you guys been involved with him
I
over the years?
I had
We don't
We
talk about
had the
that. Okay.
pleasure of
You,
posting
we've
I
had
had
the
the
that.
pleasure of
pleasure
knowing
of
Craig over the years. Craig,
leading
you
a
placed
couple
a
of
lot of
searches.
leaders at the
Yes.
CRO, the CEO, and the partner leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us what you're
Yes.
seeing and what's different that you're seeing out there.
You know, when I look at the current landscape, I want to step back to like what Joe is saying and respect immensely the past. Where we are today is we're in a very unique situation. And I think, when you take a look at 2009 to 2020, we saw an uptick in technology, a bull market that was free money everywhere, growth beyond belief, and quite frankly, a lot with that came some sloppiness. And you saw companies get away with things that you can't get away with today during that 10-year run. Hiring, the war for talent across all functions was as fierce as I've ever seen it in 30 years. And then you drop in COVID and the COVID tech boom right at the very end of that. And that's when it was, that now you're starting to see leaders that were leading for the past 12 years from 2009 to 2012, whether it was board members, CEOs, CROs, some of them were getting their business maturity in a bull market. And they never knew what going through a bad economy looked like. And so what did happen is the channel really, accelerated. It was a force multiplier, but in a lot of ways, everybody was successful. And then the market drops.
Then the
Right?
last 5 years up.
Right. And then if you take a look at the last 3 years, whether and I look at it through a personal and professional lens. That's what, recruiters do. You look at things and you can't help but look at the global stage being a very ambiguous, very uncertain world that we're living in. And we could pick on a lot of different things, whether it's the political landscape, are we at war? We're at war, the Ukraine-Russia war, mental health, work from home, back to work. And CEOs had to deal with more change in 2 years than they probably did in the last 15 combined.
Yeah.
And so all the while, revenue slipping. And so we saw a massive exodus of, marketing leaders and channel leaders, because those leaders sometimes are the first to go, but not the good ones. The good ones had staying power. And now what we're seeing is a return back to, well, there's still ambiguity. There's more uncertainty today than there was, personally and professionally on the global stage. What I believe everybody wants to see is more certainty in their channel, in their go-to-market. They want certain revenue. Like, we have numbers to hit, and we need better people, and we need to be thinking about, how go-to-market is evolving. And to Joe and Hope's point, that it is, there is harmony between the CFO, CEO, CRO, and channel leaders today, more so than ever. The ones that are getting it right have harmony, where it's less of a separate organization, to Joe's sense. So I think that's putting a lot of pressure on a lot of the CRO searches that we're doing, channel leader searches. That's certainly there. And there is one other thing that that is unique. We spent the first 20 years building OEMs. Anybody competed against Cisco, a lot of the cybersecurity infrastructure. My brother in his practice leads all software, so they're in enterprise software. But the partner community is transforming. So what you saw 4 years ago isn't the same CRN VAR company it is today.
No
and
way.
So the complexities of being a channel leader and understanding the landscape of, AI and, how cyber is part of every MSP's footprint today. It's just a fascinating market. And I think it's putting some pressure, certainly, on making sure you have a really strong leadership team when it comes to the channel.
I love it. And we just had the privilege of hosting a CFO forum for a company, and the CFOs are becoming strategic alliances to the best ones are really getting it to the CEO and the go-to-market leader. And that is just such a shift. It's so fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, Jessica, we're going to ask you quickly, and then we'll get into the next question, because we will not go through without talking about AI in this next era.
I know. I've been listening to all the answers, right? I think the go-to-market today is not just in a single threaded channel, right? It's in an ecosystem with clarity around revenue and scale and things like that. And to Craig's point, the ambiguity has to go away. We now are looking for somebody who is can predict things, and we can really count on the revenue that partners are bringing us, because ecosystems are not or not just a channel, right? It's a continuous operating system. And AI is only accelerating that gap between the leaders and the laggers. And the best organizations that are using AI for productivity are capturing net new opportunities that others can't even see because they're too consumed with orchestrating their ecosystem.
Great. I see several of my favorite people on this webinar, so please ask us questions. Several of you really care deeply about what I care about, which is, okay, what are the skills? Like, let's talk about what do people that are at this level and or aspire to be at the C-suite hope, what skills do they need now?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. We spend a lot of time talking about skills and about AI and the differences the AI make, but it's those people who have a curiosity to learn, right? Those who
Mhm.
are willing to take risk and learn and lean in, are still going to be successful in the world of AI. I think a lot of people get concerned that we say so many jobs are going to go away and so forth, but those who are able to take the data that they get to ask the right questions. I think I shared with you, Theresa, I take these prompting classes all the time to figure out how do I use Claude better? How do I use Chat GPT better? How do I use Glean better?
Awesome.
It's those who are able to ask those important questions and be curious and be diligent about the data who are still going to win in the world of AI.
Hmm.
So you're
Hmm.
still going to have to put your brain to work. AI is not going to do everything for us. So when I look for
100%.
leaders in my org, the ones who have a curiosity for learning, the ones who aren't afraid to make mistakes, the ones who will lean out on the edge, that's what I'm still looking for. That profile hasn't changed because it's also in a lot of ways the ones who got them through .com or the ones who got them through
Hmm.
the era of all the other things that have happened. I mean, we've all grown up in an era of tech from dial-up modems, like, us of a certain age, to, you got mail, to, now it's AI. But the people who are still here, a lot of us on this call, are all here because we have a curiosity. We've taken risk and we're continuing to lean in, which I
Love
think
it.
really is what it is, in
Yeah.
my opinion. I don't get so caught up in AI as itself, but it's the hard work and the curiosity of the people
Yeah.
is really what matters.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Curiosity and problem solving, two of these next big skills. Okay, Jess, any comments on that?
Well, I'm definitely going to lean into the AI skills because you do have to be very curious. And I think a lot of people are gun shy. I mean, if you look at how AI has rolled out over the last 4 years, it started with organizations saying, if you use it, we're going to fire you. And so, of course, that gives people some sort of pause when they now all of a sudden are saying, no, but you can use it, but in this way only. And so I think it has taken some to stop their curiosity around it and try to operate within that box that a company has given them, or maybe even they don't want to go there because they're too gun shy. But Hope, to your point, like the people that remain curious, even above all of that, are the people that are going to win, right? AI is changing daily here. All you have to do is have a subscription to Claude and see that it's like sometimes a couple times a day that it's asking you to refresh with the next version. It is just changing literally overnight. And so if you don't have that thirst and that hunger to understand it and really try to learn everything and flex on yourself to use these tools to the best of your ability, then I do think that there you're going to see a lot of people go to the wayside.
All right, Joe, we're getting some questions too about how AI is
Mhm.
reshaping. We'll
Yep.
talk about the channel partners next. We'll stay
Yeah.
on the skills for the folks that are in this space. And then I love the questions about the partners. But in
Yeah.
addition to AI, what other critical skills do you see, Joe?
I was getting at it earlier, and I think Hope nailed it, is some of the traits and characteristics that made someone successful as an individual in channels, as a PAM or even a channel leader 25 years ago, are the exact same things today. We had it drilled into our head by a former channel leader at Cisco. Her name was Wendy Barr. She wanted us all to
Oh,
be consultative. That was the word that she used. And
mm,
we went through a lot of training and a lot of deep work with our individual contributors to help them learn how to be consultative. And what that means is exactly what Hope was saying. You have a natural curiosity to learn. The thinking was is that you can go meet a partner, and I don't know what's going to come out of your mouth next, but it better be a question. And that one meant she meant always probe, 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 learn about your partner. And the more you learn about them, the more consultative you can be, the more see an advantage for them to use you as a consultant. So all those traits, I think, were important 25 years ago. They're important today, regardless of if you have AI or not. AI just makes you more
Absolutely.
efficient
Yes.
at doing that role and becoming consultative to the partner.
Right. It's and we definitely want you to weigh in here, Craig. The business acumen required in this next era. I mean, these partner ecosystem business models are far more complex than anything we've ever seen in the history of business. So the deeper you lean into strategy and understanding business models and organization structures and joint value propositions, like those are critical. AI propels them.
Mhm.
What haven't we talked about, Millard? Because you're out picking guys like Joe, gals like Hope. What else?
You know, we've all the common thread so far has been curiosity, and I don't have anything different to say other than curiosity, curiosity, curiosity. I'll say it three more times. It is one of those attributes that in a market that's ever changing, you can't get rid of it. And curiosity has to do with just having an amazing open mind to how the world works, how things became who they are, what they are. Whether that's talking to a channel partner or the CEO of a channel partner, what are issues and trends are they going through, and to have that empathy. That is primary number one. And then the interesting thing is, if you're curious, take a trip down, AI for an evening, and you can get onto rabbit trails. So some of the things that we talk about in the different stages that everybody's in their career, was it, I think, Hope's point where, um, I was talking to my daughter who goes to a very well-known university in New England, and one week it was frowned upon, in university to lean on AI. She gets her first co-op with DraftKings, and the whole company is AI. So you talk about the emotional roller coaster ride of it's bad, it's good. What is it? So, I think on a personal level, the cool thing about AI is you can play with it on impacting your own situation, whether it's anything you want to do, right? Which is wonderful. And I think that's a great place to start. But as it relates back to the channel and it relates back to the partners, it's really fascinating because IT services is at the end of the day are the partner ecosystem, and they are looking at the AI as a competitive advantage in delivery of their services. And we've already
Absolutely.
started to see that service organizations and delivery organizations are now being somewhat replaced with AI level one support. But it doesn't mean the people are necessarily gone. It's just they're repurposed to now your level two is now your level one, right? So it just brings a better customer, experience. And then there's another phenomenon that's going on in the partner community. It's been, CEO founder led, and a lot of private equity money going to work in the channel, a lot of acquisitions, a lot of roll ups, a lot of tuck ins. But now we're starting to see venture capitalists lead in
Yes.
with tech enabled
Yes.
platforms, and they're looking at their private equity partners or competitors and saying we're going to be a part of this community, and they're
Yeah.
going in with an AI technology platform and then rolling up channel partners. So the complexity changes literally on a week to week basis. And that is why you better be curious about how things are moving, because it's your own responsibility to yourself to take care of your own career. But once you do that, then everything else is better in terms of more of a corporate adoption.
Love it. I'm going to do one more skill and then we're going to move on. Bridge building, trust building, business relationships. What we used to call Hope and Jess, we would call them soft skills back in the day, but these skills have become way more important. How do you lead through change? How do you lead through complexity? How do you bring people along on a journey? So, curiosity and the whatever that other half of it is. Um,
Yeah, I'll say this, if you look historically, right? So if we're looking in the rearview mirror, I think the value that an organization brought to a company, and maybe Craig, you can talk about this, is the value of what they knew, right? Their experiencing and experiences and what they knew told you that they would be a good person fit for this position, right? But now that's not enough.
mm,
Information is so easy. You have it, everybody has it right in their pocket, right? You can get to whatever you want just from your cell phone. So the qualities that are innately human, Theresa, you just nailed it. Being curious, being creative, creating trust, having empathy. Like those are the things that AI can't do that you need from a standout candidate or a person to lead in this new AI era, because those are the things that are really hard to teach. And if you're not that kind of person that is curious, that is creative, that understands how to build trust, that understands how to be empathetic, like these skills are what you really need to work on, because that's what's going to be valued inside of companies and organizations going forward. AI is going to be table stakes. You'll have
And
to do
it's
that.
it's hard to interview for the soft skills. It really
Yeah.
is. But you know, we went from we're trying to bring certainty back into revenue. And so it used to be more of like an art form,
Yeah.
relationships. It's who you knew. It's who you knew at the partner community.
mm,
And by the way, that still matters because now it's a blend. It's a blend of science, mathematics, data,
mm.
and relationships. So the blend is what's coming back into the certainty. And I think that's really important. What I didn't mention is the first part of the Millard Group was building out the OEMs. Today, we're sitting inside the partner community, with the VARs and MSPs building out their executive teams. And
Yeah.
so they are also looking at this at how to transform their own companies, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a fascinating thing when you
Great
look at
point.
that and you start taking in consideration the whole big picture. So your point, Jessica, is spot on.
Well, let's talk about Joe. You haven't spoken in a minute. Let's talk about the partner. Take a little turn because we
Mhm.
have some amazing questions if you guys are okay with that. The role of the partners in the next 2 to 3 years, hyperscalers versus, these different partner types. What capabilities do you think are important? What separates the top performers from the rest?
Whatever I say when I'm not being true, we'll see. You make
Rose
all these
crystal
predictions. I,
ball.
I look back over my career over the last 30 years and I'm going, well, I thought that was going to happen, but it didn't. So, at first glance of this thing, I think they're going to have to become way more efficient. And what I mean by that is, companies like us, we're deploying something called our services agent model for them. So these services agents will sit beside the deployment person or the solution architect to help make them more confident in promoting extreme solutions, but also give them more efficiency when they're deploying those solutions. And we're even building it into our certifications and our leveling. So, for example, today, if you become a Diamond Elite partner, which is our highest level partner, you can you have certain requirements as far as headcount goes. Just it's a very traditional method approach of certifications. You may have to have 3 or 4 people. So moving forward, we're going to reduce the number of people that are required, but you also have to use the services agent as
That's
a
Mhm.
replacement.
fantastic.
So you're
Hmm.
replacing a person with a services agent, AI agent, and I think you're going to see that more and more from vendors, which means that the dynamics of the employees that you use and how you use them are going to change at the partner. And you may not see as many people needed to deploy and do the same things you did in the past. So I,
Absolutely.
you know, do I think AI will go way beyond that? Sure. How, I don't know. But right out of the gate, I can see it becoming way more efficient and making companies become more efficient. And
Absolutely.
that's what they
And
want.
lowers the barrier to entry.
Lowers the barrier to entry. That's right.
I might be able to work with a partner that I wouldn't have worked with because of this.
That's right.
What
That's
about you, Hope? What do you think?
I mean, we're seeing it internally too at Everpure. We built AI bots, right? For competitive data, or if you're going on a call where you can look up and find out, the careabouts of the customer, the careabouts of the channel partner, the latest information, right? Everything's like right there. So I think efficiency is a big part of it, Joe. I also think those who can collaborate horizontally more, so
Mm,
work across the OEMs and really build solutions and tie into customers deeper and then build life cycle around that. How does that continuously work? How do you continually expand and adopt and renew are going to be the winners at the end? Because those who get in there and can work across, whether it be an Xtreme, an Everpure, or a whomever, and build the solutions that have a life cycle approach to it are going to be those partners who have the stickiness. So whatever comes up next, they're going to be the first ones to bring it in for the next thing, right? And they're going to have that trust already built. So I do think life cycle and services, and Joe, what you guys are doing with the bots is a big part of that too, that we're going to see those partners who get that right win.
I agree. And this notion of, these people aren't buying products anymore. They're buying these solutions
They're
and these business
definitely not buying
outcomes,
product.
right? And
No.
so how do these partners that really put these solutions together that solve business challenges and drive outcomes, I mean, I just see them winning at a whole nother level and innovating at a whole nother level.
Well, and Teresa, we got to stop just saying like we got to stop selling to the IT shops and really do it now, right? Like
Yeah,
we
right.
really got to be able to sell to the lines of business. We really got to be, like that's been a talk track. I mean, I've been the channel forever, and that's been a talk track. We're not going to sell to IT anymore. Okay. Well, now we really can't sell to IT anymore
Great
because
point.
they're not the ones holding the pocketbook. It is
Hmm.
the marketing teams. It may be the CFO. It may be the
Oh.
business line of business. So those partners who get how to sell cross-functionally in different areas are also going to be the ones who win, no doubt.
Lori Fontaine says, "What should we?" Hi, Lori. What should we stop doing with partners to unlock the next wave of growth? I think this notion of teaching partners also how to work at the C-suite, right? Because many of the partners grew up in an engineering world, or we know, and so how do they learn how to sell and partner at the C-suite? Joe, you look like you're going to say something. I hope it's funny.
Yeah, no, I don't. It's not funny at all.
Damn
I
it.
I don't have anything clever to say that's funny right now.
Yeah.
I would say stop doing. If I think about it from a PAM at the street level, from a PAM perspective, uh, stop showing up and telling the partner about what great products you have and then
Oh,
leaving.
love
Or,
that.
and probably hope's heard me say this many times in the past, so it's probably old, but the I think we still see that in the marketplace. You still see that Pam go, well, let me tell you about our program or let me tell you about our product, and then they leave and they don't really probe further. And trying to learn. I think you have to stop doing that. I think you have to
Mhm.
figure out where your product fits and how help them figure out how to sell it. We spent a lot of time here at Extreme talking about enablement
Mhm.
and enabling the seller at the partner to be able to communicate with confidence your solution to the customer. And,
Yeah.
if I can do that, much more than we even do it today, I'd be happier. So I think stop, again, at the PAM level, stop showing up and just saying, uh, here's my product, it's great, sell it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we talk about
absolutely.
getting out the PAMs out of the like, look at us, we do that too, or me too, or whatever, like we got to differentiate and you
Yeah.
can't do that just by like, here's who we are and here's some donuts and like what the perception of the channel has always been. It's not that anymore. You got to
Yeah.
tie into the channel partner's business model or what market they're going
Exactly.
after, or a press release you see from their CFO and what he needs to go after to go public, or they're an M&A
Mhm.
target. You got to understand deeper so as a PAM how to speak to that, not just like you ought to love us because we love orange and we have kick-ass products. That's not enough,
Mhm. It's not
you
The
enough.
know?
other thing I would add here, and Craig touched on this earlier, is I agree with him. We went through this window of time where things were really good, especially in the SaaS-based businesses. It was really good. Now, AI is going to make their lives very tough in the future, but what you saw from that period of time is some really bad behaviors. And I witnessed some, when you do things in your channel motions in your program that doesn't create trust. In fact, it destroys it.
I'm
And
glad you went there,
you
Joe.
do it. You do it because you're so successful and you think you can get away with it. Partners have a memory. And, WWT and all these large partners, they're going to be in business long after I'm out of this, after I retire, after we're all gone. They have a memory. And I think you can't sacrifice the trust they have in you as an individual because you're going through some really good times and being successful. And that's what I think we're coming out of. And, I'm I hear about other vendors, when I meet with partners, and they will flat tell you who they don't want to work with, who they don't like working with, and it's generally because they've destroyed trust because of hubris and overconfidence.
Yeah.
But I also think it's 100%. And if a company has gone through a couple um, iterations of a sales organization, including a channel organization, the board and the C-suite starts to get like really nervous. Well, why is it going to work this time?
Right.
And so that's where we go back to being able to have real conversations with the CFO that are different than, how we're going to increase revenue, but at a different level and a different detail and different KPIs. And that, is where, because if you stop and start channel motions, the partner community doesn't know whether they're on foot or horseback, right? And we see this in federal, right? It's sometimes hard to get federal revenue done right the first time. And oftentimes we see you got to go through 3 or 4 leaders in federal before they crack the code. But actually, the first leader was actually pretty good and going down the right path. They just did him enough time. And so time it becomes this interesting word to go in there with trust and relationship and being able to, you got to be able to work the room at your own company at the C-suite in order to get what you want. But you better understand what's motivating the board, what's motivating the investors and shareholders. And
Man, you're
that's
so
also
right.
something, right?
You're so right. The channel
It's
person
crazy.
has to interview the company if they're going into a channel leadership role as much as they're interviewing you. And
Yeah.
I cannot stress this enough. This happens over and over. I get this call all the time. Should I go work at this company? And I said, what do you think about them? What is their understanding of the channel? And 9 times out of 10, people want magic. They think you're going to pull a rabbit out of a hat. You know all the top partners. You know them. You have a relationship with them. You're going to snap your fingers, and all of a sudden, those partners are going to start doing business with you. It just doesn't work that way. And I saw this quote the other day, and it just reminded me of this situation. It's like your future is shaped by the habits you repeat, not the goals you set. And I think a channel person, a channel leader comes into a company and has to create habits and create a foundation for how things are done all the way at the PAM level, the AE level. And if you can do that, you'll see growth over time. But channel people they don't magicians. They don't create, revenue from partners just because they know them.
Yeah.
Unless you're Hub Galley.
Yes, well, Hope
She
Galley.
walks, she walks
Hope
in,
Galley.
she walks in CDW, they're just going to start buying, just money flows, right? But
Well, and we all know the most
Yeah.
successful partner, which will continue, most successful partner organizations, it's at the C-suite. The entire C-suite is aligned to
that's right.
partnering as a go-to-market motion.
That's right.
The product teams have it embedded in their product launch. It is across the functions. And that I think that remains critical, if not more critical.
Well, I shared that with you, Theresa. Like at Everpure, we have an internal model, right? A partner rating score, and it's like all the way down to the AE that rolls all the way up to our CEO, Charlie Giancarlo, around how are we doing with our partner teams? How many partners are you working with? How many deals do you have? How much of it is partner led? And so everybody knows that everybody's in the business of being a partner with the partners. And that's part of the reason, to your point, Joe, that I came to Everpure, because when it was pure, but come to Everpure because it was known, and it is known, we are known to be a great partnering company, all the way from Charlie all the way down. So I do think, to your point, Joe, it makes such a difference. And people who are interviewing for channel roles, they need to understand your book of business only does so much as the company you're working for and that brand and what they've done in the past. Because I love
AEs can destroy it.
Yeah.
I was
One
just
bad
gonna,
apple can
yeah.
destroy it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, the profile of the seller is evolving dramatically right
Oh,
now.
absolutely.
The what got
Yeah.
us here won't get us there. These
Yeah.
collaborative sellers versus those hunter killers that could do it alone. You got to
I
know
mean, you don't need
hyperscalers.
the partner touching an account versus like an Xtreme or an Everpure or whoever. I mean, the partner is constantly touching that account for something. They are
Right.
constantly in there. They're constantly getting deeper, either in relationships or technology. They're bringing so much value to us that we need to recognize that across the entire organization, whether you're sales, marketing, the channel team, whomever, and make sure that we're respecting their relationships because they are constantly touching that customer when we're not.
And their ecosystem
Hmm.
is their sales motion is also changing
Yeah.
back to being at a more of an advisor or a consultant where if you're selling on price and a nice refresh cycle, everybody loves that. Who doesn't love that, right? It's good timing at the right spot, the right time, good relationship. But for the partner community itself that understands that there's more revenue around services and being able to sell services, you need to be able to go in and have a conversation. If you're selling to a $50 million manufacturer, you better be able to hold your own in a conversation. And the key word I'm going to go back to is curiosity. You better be able to go east, west, north, south as a
Yeah.
seller to talk about business outcomes and business challenges and understand that. And here's the cool thing. AI can be a force multiplier for
Absolutely.
getting in, just like I hope you were saying earlier. You can do a lot more upfront to have a partner effect, a true partner selling motion. And I think the CAMs and the PAMs, the good ones are aware that their audience, their customers are going through that too, and not just selling on price alone and lunch and learns and golf tournaments. Like,
Those days are
those
so
days are
far long
fun. They're not
gone.
over, but you got to be bringing the value. You
You
have to
got to be
be.
bringing. Lori Fontaine talks about the C-suite multi-partnering, and I really do believe we hyperscalers, two or three ISVs in a solution. It might be two or three partners in the solution, and then we procure through the marketplace, and so that is the era of the future. Yay or nay?
Yeah, I mean, I think the year I left Cisco was a 2020 hope. We had done some studies and then we found that on every single transaction, there were a minimum of 7 companies involved with the transaction, if my memory
And
serves
that
me.
was 2020,
And that was
right?
2020.
Yeah, it
And
was six
I
or
don't
seven, Joe.
suspect,
I remember
yeah,
that study. Yep.
I don't know that that has changed. It probably has gotten more since then. But
Hope, did you just say 6, 7? Because we both have
Yeah,
I
I
kids.
think she
did.
did
I
just
did
say
just,
six,
I
You
seven.
said
did
that
say
just for
six,
my
seven.
teenage daughters. There you go.
Way to go. My kids
I'm
will be
trying to
very
bring the comedy since Joe is not. I'm
Joe is
trying.
being so
I'm not
serious
feeling the
today.
comedy today. I don't know
I
why,
know,
but
Joe. I'm trying. I'm trying.
Well,
nothing appropriate anyway. Let's put it that way.
let's talk about the leading and lagging indicator metrics for success for folks at your level. Any new ones that you would say we need to be measuring?
The only new one that I've implemented is the AI usage of our partner. We have a partner AI assistant tool. We're measuring not only usage, but how we can embed it into our incentives. And so when we're doing funded heads, for example, I'm assuming everyone knows what that means by funded heads. We're funding heads at a partner.
Yep.
One of the measurements we're using to measure the effectiveness of the funded head is the partner AI usage tool that we're providing. So that's new. Other than that, it's pretty traditional for me. I love deal reg. Everyone who knows me knows I love to talk about partner source deal reg or teaming deal
You
reg.
do
I'm
talk about
very
deal reg
yeah.
in
I
every
like
conversation.
deal
Yes.
reg, and it because it in my mind it creates trust between the
It
vendor and the
creates
client.
trust. Trust at scale is deal reg.
And anyone who goes, well, they don't like deal reg or they don't think it creates trust, I think they don't understand it. But
That's good.
I think, measuring those traditional things, measuring effectiveness of the PAM through a partner business planning process and how they're doing planning, And there's a lot of tools out there now. And you know what? Interestingly enough, we're actually using AI, and we're finding AI can do a lot of what traditional tools are out there that are doing for, that we may be buying off the shelf. AI,
Jess is doing some very innovative
yeah,
things for clients in that
there you
area.
go. So
She's
it's pretty
smiling in a big
interesting.
way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
those are some of the
redesigning
big
the
ones.
business planning process too, to simplify and make it a much more experiential with the partner leveraging AI.
Yeah, and then the other one is, I'm a dinosaur, but I love to look at route to market data. No hope knows this, and see what the landscape looks like across the routes in each of our individual markets. Like I said, it's traditional in that way for me.
Love it.
I think the
Also,
time frame on that is shrinking, right? Where used to measure how long it take to sign a partner and then how long to that co-sell, and it could be weeks. Now it's measured
great
in
point.
days. It's
Great
measured in
point.
days.
That's a really good point.
If you have that, like I think of almost like a Pam can almost be like a bionic partner, right? Instead of a
Mhm.
Pam, call him bionic man, bionic woman, dating myself. But like how do you amplify that, as a user, but then also what is your company doing to help you do that as well? And are you throwing that assist over to your partner community as well?
I mean, I'm
Great.
I'm trying to get as much AI enabled onto my partners to get everything off of them so they can be the consultants, so they can be curious, so they can be deeper in the business. So they're not
Mhm.
chasing deal reg. They're not chasing, did I get my payment? When will I get my payment? So they're not chasing who is my AE. So they're not,
Mhm.
these things that we,
All at their
we're,
fingertips.
yeah, we have
Mhm.
these like, portals, and now we're building chatbots and we're doing all these things. I want to try and get as much of that into AI, and that's where the AI multiplier is, so that they can do
Mhm.
back to the soft skills that we talked about and the deeper in the
Mhm.
business and curiosity, so they can be true business advisors to our partners and not just the people they're calling to chase my deal reg, who's my AM, who's like all those little I want to get all
Mhm.
that off their plates.
Mhm.
And I'll bet how many, there's got to be 30 to 40, 50% of their daily lives are, it's repetition. So
Yeah.
if you can replace that with, other selling motions of or value, or
Right.
in the field more, or, doing something with the marketing team, where you're actually doing outbound events and driving real revenue as opposed to getting caught up in that. I think that's something that we see both on the OEM side, right, with the Extremes and Everhopes of the world, but Everpures, Everhope,
For
Ever
hope.
hope.
Forever hope,
I'll take it. I'll
forever,
take
That's a
it.
good
forever,
one.
always
I'll
hope.
take it.
Yes, that's fabulous.
Forever hope. All the way to the actual partner community, right? Like where they're
Mhm.
repurposing, their pre-sales or their sales reps inside, where they can get rid of that motion and create a new motion that's, again, more efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. One
And
thing I haven't seen though, I haven't seen AI reduce the number of meetings internally
Oh,
at our company, at any company.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that we're more meetings now than ever. And
mm,
surely we can figure that one out with AI. But I do, to Hope's point, and it was the guest participant asked the question, what can you stop doing? Those are some of the things I hope we can stop doing. Like, I
right?
don't want a Pam answering who the AE is on an account. That is the most wasted time for a Pam's, you know.
Jess,
Very true.
maybe talk a little bit about predictive analytics in this new era, because we can now tell exactly how many partners a PAM should have to optimize, or like talk about some of those things that we've been able to do.
Yeah, some of those like leading indicators can be very predictive of what's going to happen. And I think we can get very smart, and AI definitely helps us get to this finished product faster than before. It, looking at just a partner trajectory and what does their pipeline look like, and compare that to the past, and what does it really mean if that's coming in, and you can get a little bit more certainty into that information. We talk about co-sell, but there are a lot of different metrics inside of that co-sell velocity. Like how long did it take to actually get to this point? How long did it take to close it? And you can start to compare, the co-sell with and then deals without. So you can get really interesting in how you start to compare and contrast a lot of the things that we're doing. Influence, right? Oh, the partner influenced it or whatever. You see this a lot. And sometimes people don't want to give that, that checkbox to the partner. But I think AI lets us really start to measure the value across the entire sales journey and the entire customer journey to be able to surface their moments of value that are beyond just reselling, right? So you can take a look at all of these different metrics now in a very easy way. Before, I think you had to have a PhD in predictable analytics or statistics, but you don't have to do that now. It's very easy to get a hold of them.
Yeah. How many partners should an ideal rep have? How many deals do they need going with those partners? How many people need to be involved in those partners in order to hit the quotas? Like, it's amazing what we can do now.
I think there were a lot of those were done sort of at the market level. I mean, you can get those down to the exact rep, right? Like you can get those details very clear to make sure that you're putting the right reps on the right partners. If you've got a partner that is, hungry and innovative and they're always doing things beyond their potential, you want them with a certain PAM that's got that energy, right? And is an energizer, if you know your PQI, right? You want to put somebody on an account like that versus somebody that's more of a traditional VAR that isn't really going anywhere, but still contributes a fair amount to your bottom line. Okay, we're going to give you more of a partner that or a manager that's more relationship driven and management driven and things like that. Just whatever their personality is.
Different profiles.
So
I know.
I think you can get really deep into that. We did a study a few years ago now about how do we predict who is going to be successful inside of an organization. And we had certain hypotheses going into this study about, well, obviously the seller that works with the most amount of partners is going to be the most successful one. And in fact, it wasn't. There was a sweet spot in their company about how many, and that was a predictor. After 3 years, are they still going to be there? Are they going to be crushing their goals? What are they going to be doing? We could clearly see what was happening. So there's a lot of story in the data that we couldn't get to, but this does unlock it for us.
Yeah, there is some recent studies that will say that the new modern seller is more of an introvert than ever before. They have a way of, kind of going inside themselves because it's not about, them. And so they look internally because their whole vision is externally making sure it's a good experience and a customer experience. And the old days of, how many outbound calls you made, all that is at bats for sure. But if you have at bats with a better, seller equipped that understands, what really matters in the world is the customer, we're seeing that as a curiosity and introversion, which you wouldn't think in sales would go hand in hand, but it is.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right,
one of
let's
those soft
do
skills.
soft skills. Yeah. Why don't we do your one takeaway, one thing you're doing or you recommend doing to develop our next generation of leaders? Hope you want to finish this off because we know you're on vacation and we need to get you back on vacation. Thank you for joining us today.
I need to get back to the Mai Tais.
Take more vacation. That's the answer.
Vacation. Enjoy yourself. Take more vacation.
Absolutely.
I think is the thing I'm trying to do more of, and I think this is across the board. I think we all got so into our own little worlds during COVID, and you had like your pod that you were associated with and stuff, and then people like right after that were kind of out there and like, I called it like a panic, right? Now we're in a state where I think everyone can learn from everyone. So what I would say is be collaborative and be curious. I ask people on my team all the time who are PAMs. I hear people who are D1 athletes who have no tech background, but are great like athletes or coaches. Like I want to learn, like I would just say, and this is a theme with me all the time, and Joe knows this, we've worked together a lot, is always be learning, always be coaching. And that's for anyone.
Yeah.
Like whether you're a quote manager or a leader or an individual contributor, always be learning, always be coaching.
Yeah, that's great. Jess is launching our AI coaching practice pretty soon.
Yes.
I
Yes,
think
for sure.
the key word right next to curiosity is adaptability. And it is why a lot of the searches, besides the leadership searches that we do take on, we will partner up with companies to build out their sales organizations. So it's great because it keeps us grounded as a search firm. If you understand what's going through the mind of a 29-year-old seller, you can then help that plumb line of, between that and the board. And, because there's a lot of BS that sometimes goes up and down and across organizations. And so I think the key word for me is adaptability. And and that's what I love about hiring, athletes, whether they're at the Millard Group or for our clients. And and I say athletes, it could be you're a great musician, but it's something that you had passion about, that you have the ability to just roll with it. The days of having playbooks are great, but they're not over. But the playbook, man, is changing, and we're rewriting them. So that adaptability, and there are some truths and some truisms that are still, in revenue and go to market that are still there. But you got to be adaptable, and I think you got to embrace technology and change, because if you don't, you're going to change yourself right out of your own career. And so I look at it that way. And from a hiring perspective, again, if I sitting down with a board or a CEO, it's the same word, adaptability and grit and grind, because those are the words, the soft skills that go into what success looks like. And, and if you're not scrappy, and scrappy is used as a badge of honor, not negative, that I think goes a real long way. And I can't tell you how much it comes up in all sorts of meetings that we're in with different size companies, venture capital, private equity, public, doesn't matter.
Across the board.
The rules are changing, man. And so that what got you here may not be the thing that takes you the next 5 years. So it's adaptability for me.
Great. Joe.
I think the question is, how are you developing people? How do you develop the next one? God, I don't know. I after 30 years, I think I've come to the conclusion I really believe in development. I know that it seems absolutely crazy to hear someone say that.
Can I fire you from the call right now?
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe, we lost the connection.
Yeah. Okay.
You're on mute.
Our modem dial-up connection for AOL is gone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hope.
No, I think
Say more. Speaking of curiosity, tell us more.
Yeah, people are who they are. And Warren Buffett says, and he seems pretty smart, you look for enthusiasm, intelligence, and integrity. And if someone has all three of them, they can learn something. And continuous learning, adaptability, of course, but you can't develop someone's enthusiasm, and you can't develop their intelligence. And you can try to develop their integrity. If they don't have it, they don't have it. And his thing he says after those three is if you have the first two and you don't have the last, it doesn't matter. So
that's a great point.
I've spent, again, I was at Cisco for 17 years. There was every development program under the sun there. And I saw so many people, I don't know if she would agree with me on this, but I saw so many people do development work, and it never changed their behaviors. It never changed them as a person, and it never changed what they did. And so I know it sounds like I'm saying something that seems defeatist and negative. I don't. I just feel like you should focus on those three things. And it doesn't matter if the person is 23 years old or they're 56 years old. If they have those three things, they're going to be a great athlete. And yeah.
I love it. So see, we listened to him, Hope, and then he came up with some fabulous wisdom.
After that little static on the line, he came through.
He pulled it off.
He pulled it off. We liked it. All right, Jess, finish up.
Yeah. I love what you said, Joe, even though we grabbed you a little bit there. Attitude versus aptitude, right? Like you can't teach attitude. You've got to come in with the right kind of attitude. And this is what, underneath that is all of the creative things, all of the adaptability, everything is there. It's wrapped up in attitude. But if there's some things that you can teach, then we need to take control of that. And I'm going to say you need to build out AI literacy and AI fluency across your team. I think it's even more required in the world that we live in partners, channels, ecosystems. Because if you're not with like Hope, where you're 100% channel or 100% partners, then you are a piece of a bigger cog, and you've got to advocate for yourself and for your team to make sure that we invest in the time and the training to give your teams that fluency. And it's not just one person that go talk to so and so, they know how to do this. It's no, every partner manager and every partner, which is the other piece of this equation. Every partner needs to know how to use AI in their workflow, where AI can create value, how to put it into a workflow. And I loved, Cindy, your call out on the prompting class. I want to get with you after this to understand what kind of things you've been able to do since you've taken that class. But there is a whole learning journey about learning how to prompt and understanding context and memory and building out agents.
You're geeking out, Baker.
Into workflows. Yeah, it's there's a whole line there.
We love you though.
What's interesting, and last point is,
okay, sounds great.
We saw marketing go through a massive transformation. We're trying to put more predictability and certainty into marketing. Revenue is going through that today. All companies are going through that today. So data curiosity with a sales ops person that's data curious, I might take that person as a channel partner over somebody who's really good at working the CRM.
Interesting. That's a great point. I love it. All right. Well, you guys, this was amazing. And I thank you so much, right, to the audience for the level of engagement and the amazing questions. We went completely off track because it was so good, all the questions. And Hope and Joe and Craig completely performed.
Thank you.
Spur of the moment. So thank you, Hope. Have a great Mai Tai and vacation.
Yep.
Joe,
have a Mai Tai for all of us.
Have a Mai Tai for all of us.
I got you. I got everyone this afternoon. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much,
Teresa.
all
Thanks,
of you.
Jessica, Joe, Hope.
Great idea, Craig.
Good to see everyone. Bye, everybody.